I'm pleased to welcome Tony Davies to the ICxA Advisory Council. Tony brings decades of commissioning experience and also is the author of the Handbook for Commissioning Managers. We're pleased to have Tony's input to the ICxA, and I had the pleasure of sitting down with him to ask him some questions and understand how he views his contribution to ICxA. Have a listen.
You're listening to the Institute of Commissioning and Assurance, where commissioning isn't a phase, it's project leadership. Unlock the systems-based approach that is reshaping delivery of today's most complex infrastructure projects, from energy systems to industrial processes to transport systems, plus much more. Say no to project failure and say yes to value creation, accountability, and successful project outcomes. Here's your host, Paul Turner.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Institute of Commissioning and Assurance. My name is Paul Turner, and I'm the president of ICxA. And today, I'm very pleased to announce Tony Davies as a new member of the ICxA Advisory Council. Tony brings decades of commissioning experience across some of the most complex projects worldwide. And he is also the author of the Handbook for Commissioning Managers, which I've got my copy right here. Tony, it's a real honor to welcome you to ICxA.
Lovely, thanks, Paul. Delighted to be part of the community.
So let's begin with your story. You've been part of this industry for quite some time, for decades, working on major projects across multiple sectors. Take us back to the beginning, maybe, of how you got started. How did you first get involved in commissioning, and what's kept you committed to it throughout your career?
Okay, so in September 1966, yep, that's the right date, 66, I started a trades apprenticeship with a blue chip chemical company and finishing that as an instrument artificer in 1970. I went into a modifications group on their olefin plants until 1975, when I got the chance to join an E&I hookup, electrical and instrument hookup and commissioning contractor for a new offshore oil and gas platform in the North Sea in the UK. There was plenty of work in the North Sea at that time, so we continued working on new installations over the next 10 years, getting more and more experience on hands-on hookup and commissioning, and then eventually promoted to the position of hookup engineer in the mid-80s when I moved into the area of scope definition and planning. During that time, I'd already realized that the technologies that were being used were changing rapidly. Relays were being replaced with semiconductors, analog control panels becoming digitized. So to keep up with this surge, it prompted me to take a degree course in technology, which I completed in 1990. Thereafter, I moved into the role of commissioning manager, working internationally for the next 15 years, working on capital contracts for oil and gas projects in such areas as Australia, Malaysia, Canada, and former Russian states. I returned to working in the UK in 2005, and that's where I joined a private completions and commissioning contracting company that provided commissioning software and personnel, and then became operations director in 2007. The company that I was working with was bought out by a major energy contractor in 2011. I stayed on until 2018 as a consultant, and then since then I've been working as a freelance commissioning consultant. So that's my journey in a nutshell.
And I think that definitely makes you one of the wise commissioning experts in the industry with that depth of experience. So then what led you to write the Handbook for Commissioning Managers? What gap did you see in the industry that needed the book written? What gap were you trying to fill for professionals in the field?
Yeah. Well, from my own career, the journey's been based on experience both in the field and in the office, and then up until quite recently, there's not been really any courses for commissioning for people to learn how to do it. Very little information has been available in terms of what to do, how to do it, when, in what order. So the handbooks are an attempt to capture my own experiences, and then especially for new engineers and managers.
It's definitely a challenge. You don't see too many people online or resources that that people can go to understand this complex field for sure. So your handbook has definitely been instrumental for lots of people getting into the field. One of the biggest challenges, I think, is that, or what I find, is commissioning is often misunderstood and just treated as testing at the end, right? Anybody hears the term commissioning and they immediately think testing, but it's much more than that. So from your perspective, how would you define commissioning leadership?
Yeah, I mean, the situation is improving, but 200 projects have failed in the past due to misconception that it's just testing at the end, because the commissioning really should always begin with the end in mind. Start with the definition and planning as early as you can. Tight control of the commissioning schedule throughout the duration of the project, because if commissioning fails, then the project fails. And that's the message that should really be made loud and clear to all clients and organizations when starting off with new projects.
And you mentioned that it's improving, but why do you think the industry has been so slow to recognize commissioning as a form of project governance and leadership rather than just a technical step? When we see that projects are failing because commissioning is misunderstood, why is it being so slow to recognize the importance of commissioning?
What I found that normally at the conceptual phase of capital projects, that's where most of the main commercial and strategic decisions are already being made. So it's really a matter of being in the right place at the right time with the right audience. Those who've got the client's ear, those who can shout the loudest usually win. And at the early stages, the capital projects, they've traditionally been driven by the cost of engineering, fabrication and construction. And commissioning hasn't really had much input because they've largely been viewed as the end of construction. So what happens then is by the time that the project's getting to feed, the project strategies are already being decided. So very difficult to change that.
So that would make me believe, with your description there, that the challenge is more so of a project governance issue rather than a testing issue. And when you look at the global project landscape, what do you see as the biggest challenge in delivering major infrastructure and industrial projects today?
Well, I mean, politics play a big part in what type of projects are sanctioned and when they can go ahead, and especially in the energy industries. Once that hurdle's been passed, then really trying to schedule enough the right kind of commissioning resources, that can usually be quite a challenge. So having somewhere that you can tap into a store of personnel to draw from, that would be very useful. On time within budget delivery can also fail once problems start to happen during the early stages. So engineering and fabrication and construction, when they start revealing themselves at commissioning, then that's really the point of no return. So the identification and management and resolution of all of these early issues is really crucial to delivery of the project.
You make a good point mentioning on time and on budget. That's typically the project manager's role, to manage cost and manage schedule, right? But if project management was all that was required, projects would be succeeding, except that they're not. So where do you see commissioning and outcome assurance fitting into the solution? What can they do that traditional project management often can't or often misses?
Okay, I've read through the ICxA Outcome Assurance Standard, and that is a good project. It's a good standard. Defines what's to be governed from the beginning and to ensure that the correct items are achieved. And so it's got the potential to be able to detail these benefits in terms of the on-time delivery and sustainability directly to the client before the new projects reach the point of going out for inquiry. So normally by the time the project's attended, it's too late, because commissioning will then often fall under the banner of PC. So again, it could be too late.
We end up essentially where the decisions have been made and the damage is already done. And rather than commissioning being a proactive leadership element, it's more of a reactive cleanup component to address maybe some of the earlier mistakes that were made earlier in projects. So you've led commissioning efforts on some incredibly complex and high stakes projects. Can you share a story where commissioning really did make the difference and did prove the project to be successful in the end?
Yeah, there was a project offshore Australia in the mid-90s for a new platform installation on the Northwest Shelf, and it was a concrete gravity structure base which was built in Bunbury in Western Australia, and an integrated topsides deck built in the Keppel Fells yard in Singapore. So at great expense, commissioning teams were sent to both sites to Bunbury and Singapore to pre-commission equipment at the yards before float out. There was a stretched target for production once the platform was installed at 50 days after mating it. So 50 days after the base went out and 50 days after the topsides were floated over and mated, the target for production was set at 50 days. So because of that, the decision was made to not only pre-commission, but also to commission as many systems as possible prior to sail away of the structures. Yes, I mean, there was one or two minor issues, but really due to the effort of everyone involved in the offshore phase, it went very well. And they actually achieved startup in 45 days, and that was a record at the hookup commissioning and startup of an offshore platform.
Now, that's the right approach for commissioning. And unfortunately, on the other side, is there an example where commissioning was overlooked and undervalued and the project suffered as a result? What would leaders take away from an experience where commissioning was overlooked?
There was a platform where it was an offshore hookup instrument hookup and commissioning engineer at that time in the late 70s. The platform had oil production, water injection, gas compression facilities. But at that time, the client commissioning was even less regarded then than later on. But the client then had made the decision to commission the gas compressors themselves. But unfortunately, instead of achieving the gas compression within a target of 90 days, which was the following of oil production, when they tried to start up the gas compressor, there was debris in the line going from the suction scrubber. That found its way very quickly into the first stage compressor, caused a huge amount of damage, and the repairs took like 9 months to complete. So the message coming out of that is don't attempt to run any rotating machinery without complete thorough inspection of pipeline cleanliness.
Now, there's so many lessons learned like that, and it seems challenging for project leaders to learn from those lessons and don't make the same mistakes. It's a challenge in the industry for sure, but I do think that your book is helping define commissioning as a profession on its own that needs attention on projects for successful outcomes. How do you see the role of commissioning manager evolving over the next decade?
I'd like to think that, with the added guidance and the past experience from industry professionals, with the availability of commissioning standards and the formation of the likes of the ICxA, the Global Academy for Commissioning, then I'd like to see that the future for commissioning managers it already looks to be in a better place than it has been for a long time. The evolution of that for me would be really to fully embrace and incorporate operational readiness and assurance, or RNA, because that at the moment currently seems to be treated as a black art, much as commissioning used to be. When you look at the wizards of ORA, I don't know many people that actually specialize in that area. It's another one to capture, I think.
That's interesting that you mentioned that, because we're just working on our operational readiness standard, and we'll probably have that released hopefully in the next couple of weeks, so everybody can get their hands on that standard and shed some light on the importance of actually achieving operational readiness on projects, which is, of course, everyone's goal working on projects to achieve operational readiness. So what skills, for someone that's new into this field of commissioning or operational readiness, what skills or mindsets do you think commissioning managers of the future will need to be able to succeed in delivering today's complex projects?
Well, they're going to need to have really total awareness of how the whole areas of the plant of the commissioning, how it operates, how it's designed, how it's fabricated, how it's built, tested, commissioned, be able to fault find and correct, be able to start it up, and especially plan for future maintenance for things like access and isolations and overrides. All of those areas need to be thought about working as a commissioning manager.
Definitely, it's a transdisciplinary leadership position, not just technical, but understanding contracts, understanding commercial aspects, having good communication, being able to work with people, spanning all disciplines across mechanical, electrical, civil, automation. It definitely requires experience to get that depth of knowledge to be able to be that transdisciplinary leader to lead projects to success.
Yeah.
So moving on to another topic here, you've agreed to join the ICxA Advisory Council, and we're pleased to have you part of the team advising ICxA. So why was this important to you to get involved and join the ICxA Advisory Council?
Yeah, well, I'm not in full-time employment anymore, so it allows me to concentrate on this area more so than I used to. It was important for me to do this so that, again, like the way that writing the book, it's sharing my experiences and helping to guide future generations with personnel through their own journeys. So I think it's important that certainly professional people need to think about who's coming in behind them and how they're going to work.
And I agree, that's definitely important. Lots of our wise commissioning experts are retiring over the years, and we need this knowledge transfer so that the new younger generation can come in and take the reins and continue with the expertise required to deliver projects. So when it comes to the standards that are being released, how do you see ICxA's global commissioning standard and ICA global outcome assurance standard really making a difference for project owners and industry leaders? How can people in the industry leverage these standards for improved project performance?
The standards that are coming out are really good, and it's a great step forward in standardizing the guidelines for commissioning, delivering operation across the board. And lots of people have different ideas of how to do things, but unless it's in a standard, then it's only in their head. If it's good and it works and it can be used, then it needs to go down as a standard and not just live in people's heads. I think what will be required at some point in the future with the standards is to boost the values of the initiative. There's some real life examples and proofs in terms of graphics and figures and records that demonstrate that using the standard does benefit the industry. It's early days yet, but I think it's something that should be considered.
Absolutely, yeah. We've also got plans to develop those standards into full ISO international standards for more recognition, more adoption to standardize project delivery. So we can start with the end in mind. We talk a lot about outcome assurance. What does that phrase mean to you, and why do you think it's such an important complement to commissioning?
Yeah, I mean, it's concisely, it's integrated governance right from the beginning so that you can achieve a successful end, again, with the on-time startup and delivery, stable operation, sustainability, also, as we said earlier, the inclusion of OR, I think it is complementary to commissioning.
In order for everything to work well at the end, in order to start with the end in mind, have commissioning go smoothly, you really need that upfront governance structure to set the project up for success at the beginning so that it can end successfully at the end. So yeah, I definitely agree. Outcome assurance is essentially an extension of quality assurance to make sure that it's built correctly. Outcome assurance is then to make sure the project achieves its intended outcome. If you could give one message to project owners about outcome assurance, what would you want them to understand?
Really, it would help them to achieve full free startup on time, sustained production. But that would only be enhanced by early engagement of, as we said, when agreeing the project strategy.
And for that upfront engagement, if you were sitting across the table from a project director that was about to start a mega project, a $5 billion project in any industry, what's the single most important piece of advice that you would give them?
To consider integrating commissioning with owner operations, use a firm startup, potentially incentivized to drive the project from concept to operation.
How do you necessarily get that incentivized component at the beginning to drive projects in the right direction to achieve that outcome, rather than often what we see as projects kind of drifting in the wrong direction or focusing on misaligned priorities? How do you drive those incentives to align with the owner's incentives?
A partner project where you have all the component parts. So you've got the client, the fabricator, the engineer, constructor, commissioner, all as part of this partner group, all with a stake in success. And the stake in success be financed by the client as a pot of gold at the end to be divvied up through across each of the partners. Something like that.
Right in contracts right from the start, right? It's got to be embedded in contracts to find the rules of the game. And if you can set the right rules, then that should align incentives.
Exactly.
So I see some comments in the chat. Some people are asking about how to get into this profession. For any young professionals that are just starting their commissioning careers, what advice would you give them about becoming not just testers, but actually leaders and orchestrators of project outcomes?
Make yourself fully aware of the big picture. What does the plant do? How does it work? Where do you make a difference? Always remember that the devil is in the detail. Never forget that. Oh, join ICxA.
Great advice. I love it. You've worked in some different countries, like you mentioned earlier, in Canada and Europe, all over the world. Are there differences in how commissioning is approached in different geographical regions, or are really the challenges universal on all big mega projects, regardless of where they are?
Largely, commissioning, the approach is generally, from my experience, has been similar, but the responsibility for pre-commissioning often caught people out. I've known of cases on capital projects where construction contractors hadn't covered this because they thought it was a commissioning activity. Vice versa, commissioning contractors didn't cover it because they thought it was a construction activity. There was one instance where it caused a major upset. That was during the build of an FPSO in Malaysia. It was 10,000 pre-commissioning man-hours went adrift and had to be picked up by the EPC because of that. Obviously, that has a serious effect there on the completion dates, and then the commissioning, and then the sail away, and then the starter. So that was quite bad. Another thing to look out for that I've noticed is the requirements for certification. Again, most projects use fairly standard commissioning management systems, but there can be differences in certification requirements that can make a big impact to delivery and the way that systems are handed over. For example, documents that are known as ROK, Kazakhstan, technical passports, which are mandatory for each item of equipment that operates in Kazakhstan. That passport contains all the technical data, the design specification, the operating characteristics, material certificates, and certificates of conformity. So that's a huge amount of additional data to be managed. And then if it's not available, approved and signed off, you don't hand over the equipment, they won't accept it. So, and again, I've seen instances of that where plants have been built, ready to go, and the landscape's been done and it looks really good, but it doesn't work because the certification hasn't been accepted. So that can catch out.
Yeah, I definitely agree. You made the point about pre-commissioning, that transition from construction to commissioning, essentially that pre-commissioning element is often the most challenging, hardest aspect of projects. If you can get through that pre-commissioning smoothly, then the rest usually goes pretty well. But that transition from area-based construction to systems-based completion is a huge roadblock that is why a lot of projects fail when that transition doesn't go well, and it takes 2 years to sort out the mess because it wasn't properly planned out. What can we learn from international best practices with regards to this transition that should be applied more consistently worldwide for project completion?
There was a particular fabrication yard in Malaysia, which every day on site before starting work, and there'd be a daily activity briefing, and that would be delivered by management to everybody, all site personnel, sometimes in several languages, because people on the project that didn't speak any other language than their own. And that was to ensure that everyone was made aware of the work that's going to be performed that day in each area, all the safety expectations, any special planetary requirements. So that was a really good practice that I thought should really be a standard worldwide.
So the advisory council that we've set up here at the Institute of Commissioning and Assurance, it's really to help ICxA anticipate and prepare for future industry shifts as the world evolves. And I think we can all agree, if you've read any headlines, that there's going to be lots of changes in the world with some of these new technologies that are coming out. So what trends do you see coming that we should be thinking about now, whether it's technology or regulation or new ways of working? What should ICxA be looking for and planning towards in the future?
I think it's all very well producing the procedures to manage the activities, but I think what in addition to that, possibly sponsored training courses for commissioning in various industries, in the energy industry, the powers, the chemicals, the civil, and for the ICxA to look at issuing recognised levels of awards and qualifications, possibly up to degree level. So throughout the industry, you have an ICxA qualification, and then you have a qualification in commissioning, a program qualification.
Definitely a valid point. Yeah. And that's one of our initiatives, is to reach out and be working with universities. And we've already been in touch with a few of them to plant the seeds and have the initial understanding of commissioning, because often we see people will come through an engineering degree and not have heard the word commissioning, not even know what it is, graduating with an engineering degree. So we need to get that information out there and plant those seeds, so at least there's awareness and understanding that can lead to ideally a degree in commissioning project leadership and commissioning project management, because it is so fundamental to completing projects. So the age-old question, if you could change just one perception about commissioning in our industry, what would that be?
Listen, commissioning is not testing, it's delivering an operational facility.
And that is the fundamental goal. That's why projects are started in the first place, is to deliver an operational facility. And if people can recognize that from the start, that commissioning really achieves the project outcome, it's so fundamental to project success. So I agree. Yeah, if the sooner the industry can recognize that and understand that perception of commissioning, then projects will have better outcomes to succeed and deliver on that outcome. So I want to thank you, Tony, for joining us today, and for stepping into this role on the ICxA Advisory Council. We've got lots of great things planned to gather everyone's input on the Advisory Council and lead this ICxA initiative to change exactly that, change the perception and elevate the importance of commissioning on projects. So your insights and leadership and your contributions from the decades of experience that you've described here, and from your writing of the Handbook for Commissioning Managers, they're invaluable as we continue shaping the future of commissioning and outcome assurance.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Very happy to be involved with it all.
Great to have you here, for sure. And for everyone that's watching, if you'd like to learn more about ICxA and how we're working with leaders like Tony to transform project outcomes, visit ICxA.net. And of course, connect with Tony on LinkedIn. If you have any questions, he'll help you out. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening. Are you ready to lead infrastructure projects with purpose and accountability? Join the movement at ICxA.net and unlock exclusive resources from global standards to project delivery reform and career development certification programs. Visit ICxA.net for more information.